Welcome to the 34th edition of Podcasters. Today with Tyner. Welcome.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
And for all you people out here, Davis is sort of a neighbor. We connected a while ago, actually before we started with Podcasters. And we found out we're both chatbots adepts or fans. And but Davis is in the legal department, and
that's right. Yep.
And you're going to introduce yourself a bit more, and there is something to talk about here. So a lot of stuff happening. So that's why I invited you,
including some exciting stuff today. That's right. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. So my name is Davis Tyner. I'm a lawyer in the United States. I'm actually barred in 3 states, and I think we met very shortly after I moved here in July.
In a park.
Yeah, in a park with our dogs. So I work for a company called Verizon, big company in the United States, does telecommunications, cell phones, and also other things like that. But I have to say at the start of the podcast that I'm here speaking on my own behalf, not on Verizon's behalf.
On your personal title.
On my personal title. So none of the opinions I'm going to express or none of the statements I'm going to give have anything to do with Verizon. It's just about what I think.
And that's why I invited you. Because when walking our dogs, we had a very interesting discussion. I'm like, yeah, this is so true. And I think that it needs to be out there because the people who are designing chatbots, the companies that are building platforms, everybody thinks about it, but nobody really knows. Mm-hmm. And the risks involved, I know there's like one lawsuit in the States right now with DALL-E. Mm-hmm. And the Getty archive, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you are. No, that's right. Yeah.
And they had they picked up a few photos with a watermark of the Getty archive mm-hmm. in DALL-E, and they tried to argue that they didn't use the photos to create new photos. Well, it became kind of complicated.
It's an interesting case. Yeah,
it's a very interesting case, and I think the outcome. I don't even know if they will let it go to trial because the outcome might be a disaster.
Agreed. Yeah.
Anyway, so let's talk about there's 2 things happening in the world. There's the EU creating an AI Act, and the UK and the US are working together, if I'm not mistaken, also on creating legislation on the use of AI.
Yeah. So it's very different approaches. Okay. I think the EU Act, there's been, as I said, news on that today. It was passed out of, I believe, the Civil Liberties and Internet Internal Market Committee. They have passed out the text, and there's actually been some updates that have to the text that I actually haven't even seen. I've seen reporting on it, but it's a fairly broad-reaching, in many ways, and very innovative way to look at AI, I think.
Can you enlighten us?
Yeah, sure. So it's very outcome-focused. So they're not actually targeting AI as a technology. They're targeting things that AI shouldn't do, and they're doing it based on a 3 or 4 tiered risk structure. There are certain things that AI is just not going to be allowed to do in the EU. There are certain things that are deemed high risk. And there are certain things that are basically not really regulated. And one of the big criticisms of the legislation up till now was that general purpose generative AIs like ChatGPT or other foundational AIs, they weren't really covered because it is so outcome based. So what the outcome focus is, that the general purpose AIs didn't really fall into any bucket. And so it wasn't clear how they, or even if they were going to be regulated by the act.
So they could do whatever they want.
That was the criticism. It looks like they have now added some language in the current draft that was passed out of the committee that addresses those things specifically. And again, I'm going on reporting. Luca Bertuzzi has done some really, really excellent reporting on kind of these regulations. I wanted to shout out Luca Bertuzzi because I found the reporting there to be excellent. But it looks like they're really trying to focus in on the training data that's used in some of the large language models, so like ChatGPT, requiring people to summarize or release it. I don't know exactly how that will be done. Sounds pretty burdensome from a regulatory perspective to me, and I don't know how people will comply with it.
And how do you check it?
How do you check it? How do you know that they're being honest? Another really good question. And I think really the other thing they're trying to really focus on is how you can regulate the systems, how you can interrogate them to make sure that they are being used effectively and being used correctly to power other AI applications. That was the concern, that while you may be targeting something that is banned, for instance, something that does something subliminally, biometrics those are two of the examples of categories that are banned outright in terms of the types of things that they do. Real-time biometrics, meaning facial recognition in crowds, those sorts of things are just beyond the pale as far as the law is concerned.
Only governments can use that.
There are narrow exceptions for things to help look for missing children, et cetera, that they put explicitly into the law. But the thought is, if a foundational or general use model could be used for those purposes potentially, how do you regulate that? And so it looks like the regulations that they're putting in, and again, this is just on third-hand reporting that I have not seen the text itself. It looks like they're looking at copyright law, making sure that things are not covered there, that they're looking at the fine-tuning, and the summaries must be detailed enough to know what's going into it, how the model works, some of the things kind of around that. So it's more transparency is how they're looking to regulate those sorts of foundational models.
So like the whole discussion in ChatGPT when it came to a conclusion and they didn't put in any links or fake links or invented links or dreamed up links.
Hallucinated things, yeah.
I found that, I experimented a lot with it. It's the way you prompt it. You can get the right information from it. But it's just the way you prompt it to get the right information. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't necessarily have to dream up links or references. It can actually give you the right references if you ask it correctly.
And if it's within its data set. No, I think that's right. It's really about how you prompt it. But because it's so conversational, people who are not experienced at it definitely get those hallucinations. It's really kind of a funny thing to see.
It is. I had an experiment with, I also train medical professionals. And we did an experiment in one of the trainings, and I asked two cardiologists to give me a case, and they gave me a case, and none of them ever tried ChatGPT or one of the other tools, and they were astonished because I asked for 5 differential diagnoses, and they just fell off their chairs because it included a diagnose that they wouldn't have thought of, but made perfect sense based on the data.
Interesting.
And I looked at it like, oh my God, we would have never considered this. This is amazing. And I said, yeah, and I can also provide you with the research or the test you have to do in order to figure it out. So then it produced that. And if you need references to articles, I found that too. And I even knew some of the authors. So while doing that, they were amazed. And I said, well, that's not the problem. The problem is your patient. He's going to not know how to prompt this. Put in his blood works and everything and get these weird results and going to come to you and be stressed.
Right. Just like Dr. Google does to everyone today when people put in their symptoms and comes up with these really, really odd diagnoses, and doctors hate it. Yeah, doctors hate it. Yeah,
and rightfully so, because they don't know what the patient doesn't know what he's doing. But you said something about intellectual property or
copyright. Copyright. Making sure that things are not, that the training data is not.
How do you do that if you have 15 billion, 30 billion?
It's a really good question, and I hope we kind of get into this later a little bit in terms of some of the cautionary tales around potential liability, because ChatGPT is like the example du jour, I think. And no one knows exactly what their training data set is. They've never released, OpenAI has never released what their training data set is.
It's not so open as they...
Well, yeah. I think their technical paper, though, referenced, I think it goes by, it's a common crawl, I think is what it's called, the data set. And basically it's a free data set available in the United States. And they make no secret about the fact that they just crawl the internet. And unless you've opted out of their crawl, they're going to include the data in it. And so that raises to me some real concerns about copyright, some real concerns about privacy, and how are we going to make sure that the people who are trying to get their data taken out for
the
GDPR,
right to be forgotten,
the right to be forgotten, the right to have data corrected, very hard to do when you're using training data that really isn't scrubbed for that. So,
but one step before that,
yeah.
If you have a website, I'm not a lawyer, I'm an economist by origin, so. If you have a website and you put information out there,
yeah, is
that information? I wrote that. Is that information copyrighted or not?
Yeah, anything you write, generally, I mean, copyright laws varies from place to place, but generally speaking, if you wrote it, you have a copyright to it.
Okay, if I have a copyright to it, I never gave ChatGPT the right to scrape that off the website and use it to train their model.
That's correct. You didn't.
So how do I know if they use it?
You don't, because they haven't disclosed it. But even if they did, what would your remedy be?
Well, interesting enough, I would assume, because there's something else going on, I would assume you would put them on your website. I give no permission, or this company gives no permission to any LLM to scrape this data to train their model.
Yeah,
and if everybody does that,
well, it's really interesting, because I actually looked at the Common Crawl's website today, and their model is an opt-out model, which does not work. In terms of GDPR or any of the other privacy regulations that I'm aware of.
You need to opt in.
You have to opt in. And so, but the way you opt out is just adding some text to your robots.txt. So you have to know that this is what they want to see in the robots.txt file of your website. And if you don't have it in there, too bad. There's no way that would hold up. Yeah, there's no way that would hold up in a court. And so I think they're philosophically, their position is we want information to be free. I understand that philosophical point of view. But I don't know that it's legally defensible. I'm not their lawyer. I'm not giving them legal advice.
No,
but yeah,
it's interesting because I work in the field of conversational AI, and we have this passion for chatbots. Everybody's looking to train their bots with AI or large language models. And if you think about it, what happens if all these big corporations start using these models, and turns out there is a copyright problem in all of these models, which I wouldn't be surprised there is.
Or a GDPR problem. I completely agree. Yeah. I think Italy recently banned, or ChatGPT can't be used in Italy, at least as of a month ago. I don't know, maybe they've resolved it.
They resolved it.
But for a long, that was the concern, was that there was GDPR violations, and there's no way to correct the data or delete it from their training set. And then what do you do? And even more than that, the way in the United States, I'm sure people in your audience have come across this, certain websites from the United States are not available here in Europe. And the reason they do that is because they're trying to effectively say there's no nexus of jurisdiction. We're not creating content for the EU, and so therefore we shouldn't be, that's how they're trying to comply with the GDPR. Exactly.
Which makes sense.
It does. But if their content is scraped by common,
and we're using ChatGPT,
exactly,
it still ends up here.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, oh wow, this potentially is like a time bomb.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. Yeah.
And I didn't think at that level. I thought with the DALL-E case that is going to have some impact. But that probably will be resolved in some technical way. But this is more complex because the amount of training data, it's the
inherent nature of large learning models. I think that it kind of raises these issues. I think it's fascinating. It's going to be litigated for sure. And I don't know how it's going to be resolved. Yeah,
and if they litigate it in the States, it's going to be if people have a claim, it's going to be massive.
Well, I think that it could be massive here in the EU too, assuming the
but
EU...
then the EU penalizes not the individual. In the US, it's the individuals.
No, that's true. But I think the kind of penalties they're talking about in the EU AI law are massive.
Yeah, hundreds of millions.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, basically percentages
of revenue, or it could be ruinous for companies potentially. So yeah, it would be a large risk that they'd be taking.
There's another issue with ChatGPT and the huge models is that they need so much energy and so much clean water to run.
Yeah.
That if you would look at the ESG rules and regulation, by no standard they comply. So any company that says, "Oh, we're environmentally friendly and we have the ESG standards," they wouldn't be able to use a large language model because it's definitely not environmentally friendly.
Blockchain, same issues. Yeah.
So this is interesting. Yeah. But going back, we have this EU Act. Did they already decide it? Did it pass already?
No, so it's passed out of committee. I think the next step is it's going to go in front of the Parliament. Okay. And then I think I'm not because I'm a U.S. lawyer. I'm not an EU lawyer. I don't know exactly the process, but if I remember correctly, I think it has to be signed off by the Commission as well. The thinking is that it's going to be passed by Parliament this summer and then probably go into force sometime this fall. Oh, wow. And I'm looking like it passed out of a large majority of people voted for it in committee. It's generally a good sign. It's going to pass. And so I think it's very likely to come in force, if not exactly as written, in a very similar form. And so what I found interesting kind of researching and looking at this for today's podcast is the kind of list of topics that are kind of deemed high risk in terms of outcomes or solutions.
Enlighten me.
So it's biometric identification and categorization of natural persons is a high risk. Makes sense. Management and operation of critical infrastructure.
Makes
sense.
Perfect sense.
Educational and vocational training.
That doesn't make sense.
Employment, workers management, and access to self-employment. So decisions about employment, promotion, things like that.
But the weird thing, there's so many AI systems already in HR scanning CVs.
Yeah.
So resumes. How does that basically those will be forbidden?
Not forbidden. These are high risk, so they're just going to be heavily regulated.
Yeah, but we know they're biased. And and the interesting thing is there are already AI systems that actually understand how these systems work. Yeah. They create your resume to circumvent. Seriously, that's not a joke.
Yeah, no, I know.
There's this guy on LinkedIn. He did a test and he had his resume rewritten by one of these AI tools to circumvent the HR AI systems. And he went by all of them, flying colors. He got invited everywhere.
Oh, that reminds me of
it's for a long time. Fuck the system.
Yeah, no, for a long time in the U.S. to apply for a federal job. Yeah, they had the same thing where basically they were scanning for keywords, and they would take the job posting and include the keywords. And so one of the tips, it doesn't work anymore. People don't try this at home. You get caught and they throw away your resume. But what worked for a long time was you would take the entire text of the job posting, put it in 0.5 point font in a little box in the bottom of your resume in white font so no one else could see it, but it would be scanned. And so all of the keywords would get hit and you get moved to the top of the pile. But that doesn't work anymore. But yeah, I love those sorts of gaming things.
This is actually, we will come to this later, but one of the other things, it doesn't worry me, but interests me. If you look at the impact of AI, large language models, there's big bucks going into SEO, online advertising. If you think, and Google is now trying it with the new Google AI function, and they still have advertising in it. But as a customer, you're like, okay, don't spam me with advertising anymore. Yeah. Just give me results. And I think the whole SEO, online advertising realm, it's going to be gone because the models should do that work for me.
Right.
So what is going to happen with all that money, all that power that goes into there? And how do we start selling? Because basically the fuck the system tool to fuck the government over with the text in white. You need to do something to your website in order to, if you allow the LLM to scrape your website, how are you going to influence these models to get the information to the consumer?
So it's instead of search engine optimization, it's going to be AI model optimization to get your
something
results.
Like that. Yeah. But the problem is these models keep developing. So how do you keep up?
Right. Yeah. No, it's a good question. Yeah.
I don't have the answer, but I'm wondering because it's like a whole business will disappear. Mm-hmm. And something new needs to get out there.
Well, I think one of the interesting questions to me is that people generally trust chat bots because they feel like they're interacting. They feel like they're interacting with an intelligent, particularly something like ChatGPT, which is fairly sophisticated. Yeah. They feel like they're interacting with something that is kind of on par and trustworthy.
Well, I read some research about it. The reason they're trusting it because it's able to formulate in a very correct manner. Yeah. And the language is understandable if you ask for it. So yeah, it's like, okay, it's speaking to me at my level of understanding, and that makes it logical and true. And doesn't mean it's true, but it makes it, in my head, it makes it logical and true.
Yeah, it solves in some ways, but I worry a little bit about the black box problem here for searching and kind of that use case of basically give me the search result and I don't care how you got to it. I think because there's a lot of interesting research on natural language processing categorization models that have a black box type approach that people don't know how you got to where you are.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons
biased.
One of the reasons keywords are so enticing for folks, one of the reasons that search works for folks is because they can sort of understand, even if they don't really, they can sort of understand, okay, I put in these terms and I'm getting these results and that makes sense to me. It's a lot, even if it's not obvious how that worked, they can, at least in their mind, build a path to how they got there. NLP, not so much.
Nope.
And people don't tend to trust it as much. And so I wonder, maybe chatbots are the solution there to solve kind of that problem, that people can say, okay, well, I'm talking to something and it's giving me this result. But I do wonder if eventually I ask about ice cream and it gives me this results for 5 ice cream stores. Well, how do I trust that those are the right ones?
And how do we know it's not sponsored? Right?
Yeah,
with
right.
The Google
yeah.
results.
And so I wonder if it's going to come and have that same problem eventually, if that's kind of the path Google and others go down.
Wouldn't that open up the space? You already see it happening in the open source models. And they are a lot smaller and more efficient. And they basically surpassing Google and OpenAI left and right.
Yeah.
What if these models make it, they're open source, everything is open. You can actually check everything.
Right.
Aren't they going to disrupt these billion-dollar initiatives? I mean, they're huge, and they basically broke the ground for the other models.
Right.
But in the end, if they're this big, and I think Sam Altman already said something about it, it's not very obvious that they will be successful.
Yeah.
Because the inherent risks are not solved.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think I don't know that open source solves it, just because these are such complicated areas. And so it's much harder to get your mind around how they work. I mean, I think I'm reasonably technical for a lawyer. That's not saying much, but I'm reasonably technical for a lawyer, and I still have a really hard time navigating how, NLP works, how AI works, how generative AI works, all the statistical modeling that leads to it. It's a really complicated thing.
No, it is. But what happens in the open source community, the very technical people, not us, they work on it together, and they sort of iterate on each other's improvements, and it goes much faster than in these. And they're not getting paid for it; they're just doing it.
Right.
I think that's an interesting development, because in the end, you might get a model for a few $100s, and it works like a charm, and more efficient. You already have this new model. It basically works on your phone.
Oh, that's cool.
It could work. They made it that small. And
wow.
So it's well trained, and of course, I don't know what it's trained with, but it supposedly it works. So I'm just saying, it's like I think we might be looking at something that is really hyped and will work. Mm-hmm. But in order to de-risk it, these companies that put in multi-billion dollars, like Google and AWS and Meta and OpenAI,
Microsoft as well. Yeah.
10 billion.
I don't know how much, but a lot. A lot.
They're going to run into trouble, which they probably they won't be able to manage that, to surpass the open source software.
Right. And so is that investment going to be wasted? It's really an interesting question. Yeah, or at least no return on that investment at the very least.
And from a legal perspective, they have to protect their IP.
Yes.
If it's open source, there's no IP to protect.
Right.
It's open source.
Right.
So this is really interesting. As a society, if I listen to this on a legal level, they basically say, okay, we need to open up, we need to understand, make it transparent.
Right.
That's what open source is doing. It's not what ChatGPT is doing.
True. Yeah.
So let's keep this in mind, come back to this later, because I'm curious, how do you see the impact of this EU law?
Yeah, so it's very far-reaching. We only got through part of the list, so we stopped at employment. There's 3 more. Access to and enjoyment of essential private services and public services and benefits.
What the hell is that?
So think public benefits. So anything you're getting from the government, Social Security.
Okay.
but also creditworthiness decisions.
Oh, like they do in China.
Yeah. Oh, well, social credit, but also creditworthiness to get a loan from a bank. And then questions about decision making about emergency dispatch. Which order are we going to send people in? Or how are we going to dispatch? The traveling salesman type problem. Law enforcement uses, and then anything having to do with migration, asylum, and border control management.
These are all high risk.
These are all high risk. And if I look at this list, it's pretty broad, right? And
it's pretty broad, but it's interesting enough. They say it's high risk, but a lot of these things are government related. The government is doing this. And we know in Holland we had this tiny little scandal in the tax department with using algorithms with biases in them. Basically, this is what they're saying.
Yeah, that these are the high risk areas. But I mean, education, employment, these are things that touch everyone, right? Yeah. And so I think I think this law, if passed, kind of in this way, is going to impact almost every use case, almost every major use case of AI I can think of. I'm sure there's many that it wouldn't, but the things that high risk kind of AIs have to do under the law, or you have to do adequate risk assessment and mitigation systems have to be in place.
Which that makes perfect sense.
It does. High quality of data sets feeding the system to minimize risks and discriminatory outcomes. That's going to be really hard with a large language model.
But who decides if the data set is high quality? What is the definition of a high quality data set?
So one of the other things this law does is it creates a new body in the EU that's supposed to weigh in on these sorts of things. But a lot of the actual administration of this and kind of the market sampling, the market monitoring stuff is done by the individual states.
So locally.
And then they have to report up to this new organization that's supposed to kind of help coordinate what's going on here.
So we got more regulation, more reporting, more.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is going to be costly.
It's going to be costly for sure
for the companies.
Absolutely for the companies.
Because basically what you're saying, this means that small companies that work that have a great operation but work in a high risk area, if they want to introduce AI, it's unaffordable.
I think that's probably right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's a bummer. I would say.
I think. Well, I think. The law also does a lot of things like thinking about codes of conduct and ethics.
It's not all negative, right?
It's not all negative. I actually really think they put a lot of thought into this law. I think it's for a first mover on this subject, which is really, really complicated. It's a good law.
Is there enough space left to innovate?
Yeah, for sure.
So I thought that was one of the things they wanted to push forward.
Absolutely, and they talk a lot in the law about sandboxes and kind of giving space for companies to live. So there's kind of the key here is that if it's not in either the prohibited area or the high risk area, there's actually not a whole lot of regulation of the remaining spaces. Okay. Now, I think there's a lot to discuss about what does that leave, but I think there is. Definitely the law gives at least a lot of discussion to giving people the freedom to innovate and have kind of some safe areas in which they can do that. So that's also a good point in the law. I like the model by which they're basically saying you have a sliding scale of risk, and we're going to heavily regulate the top where we see things that are just completely incompatible with kind of the EU foundational principles.
Or it's only for governments.
Yeah. And then things that are higher risk, that are kind of really risky areas, we're going to regulate them a lot. And then things we're going to leave alone. And that's generally, I think, a good approach to regulation.
Did they put anything in there for medical?
I'm trying to remember.
Field of expertise.
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember seeing that in my looking.
I didn't see it either.
Yeah, I'll have to look see what the text says when it comes out.
Because I can imagine for health records that you are careful not sharing it with models or something.
Right.
But I've experimented with it, and it can actually. There were some articles comparing it with an actual doctor.
Yeah.
And it did great, and they use it for bar exams. That's the legal part, right?
Yeah.
For medical exams, and it's interesting because the knowledge ready to put out there, it can reproduce. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's beyond what a human can do.
Yeah, it's incredible. It really is.
So, yeah. So what else can you tell me about the EU part?
Well, I was gonna contrast it with actually the approach in the UK and the US. So the UK published a white paper on the 29th of March, and they're kind of, as you might expect from a conservative government, taking more of a hands-off approach. And so their white paper really talks about how they're not going to do anything at the national level for now. They recognize they probably need to look at these things. But for now, they're going to let the individual agencies regulate within their regulatory ambit. So the financial authority is going to regulate the finance aspects of AI, consumer protection, same thing, and kind of let people regulate it in those ways, kind of piecemeal for now. But they gave some principles. And so the principles that they wanted to kind of talk about from regulators to think about as they're regulating AIs are safety, security, and robustness, transparency and explainability, fairness, accountability and governance, and contestability and redress.
Do they explain these terms?
They do in more detail, and I can kind of go through them. To me, one of the interesting things about that, though, is from a principles-based approach, it's actually not that different from the EU, but they're not doing anything right now specifically to kind of effectuate it. And so they're articulating principles that are very similar to what the EU is concerned about in terms of the types of outcomes the EU is regulating, but not really approaching it from a true regulatory framework.
So we could go into a situation where a multinational company that works in European countries, in the UK and the US, might have to have a different approach with his AI. In different countries or different continents.
And this is what companies hate.
I know, because it's impossible.
Mature companies want regulatory certainty, and they want it across the world.
Makes sense.
Because even if they're being, companies don't love regulation for the most part. It's, again, me talking. But if they have to have it, they want to know what it is. They don't want it to change. They want it to be predictable and something they can work with. And in an area like this, where you're going to have essentially laissez-faire approaches, at least for now, from the US and the UK, but a very, very far-reaching act, I think, from EU, it makes it very hard for them to do their work. I think they really have to kind of go with what the EU is doing in many ways, if they want to be truly international.
So basically, you're saying you should go with the strictest regulations by design.
What is their choice, I think, really, at the end of the day? I mean, they could try to not remove Nexus from the EU if they make that decision, and if that's what their product, if they can survive in a market where they're marketing to China, UK, US.
It's impossible. You can't separate these things. It's somewhere on one server.
I agree.
Now you got to separate these models and separate the traffic. First of all, it's costly. It's inefficient. And lastly, it's almost impossible to monitor and to make sure that it's actually correct. So I think it's managerial. It's a disaster. It's a nightmare.
We have a very similar problem in the U.S. as far as even privacy regulation is concerned. There's no national privacy standard in the U.S.
You don't?
So for data breach notification, for a long time, it was 50 different state regulations. And
so if you would work in 50 states, you would have to report it in every state?
Potentially every state, and different rules in every state. Companies hated it.
Oh my God.
And so
the EU is not so bad after all, to be honest.
I don't want to speak for companies on that, but I think, the problem with it, you can see immediately. And so generally what companies would do is, just like you said, they would take the strictest rule. Generally something like California or New York, or the first movers who were writing laws. That's where you looked. That's what you complied with. And where you had to comply with something slightly different, you made it work. And so I think here, that's probably what people are going to try to do. But what you see often then as a result is a lot of intensive lobbying, which seems perverse to people, for government, the federal government, or governments to harmonize on these things. And I think we'll probably start to see that. We've already seen, I read in preparation for today, there has been no really proposal in the United States as far as regulations are concerned. NIST has looked at this. A couple of the federal agencies have looked at it within their regulatory sphere. FTC, FDA have kind of said some things on this.
SEC probably?
Not a lot, a little bit.
Because with trading, you would imagine that AI has an impact on that.
For sure. So Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, is apparently about to propose something. No one knows what it's going to be. I think he's in consultation with folks. Probably will look very similar to what the NIST has put out, at least as a voluntary regulation. But I would imagine we'll see organizations who are interested in this, OpenAI and others, Meta, Microsoft, Google, try to come together and try to articulate some principles that they would hope that would then influence the debate as far as regulation is concerned.
Like self-regulation.
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't they already go to? Didn't Biden have a couple of these industry leaders visiting him on this topic?
Quite possibly.
I thought it was in the news.
Yeah.
That I'm not sure what Biden is going to do with AI. It's not going to help him.
I think it's going to be hard in the U.S. because of the election coming up. We have an election in 2024. It's possible that Congress or the politicians want to make this a point in the election. I imagine there's other things going on that will probably take more of the air. And generally speaking, in the U.S., that's how that works, is that whatever is going to get the air in the election is what you legislate on in that year before. But
you could use AI to disrupt the elections, right? but if you think about that, because I had all discussion, in Holland we have, of course, occasionally also elections, and we have systems or online or websites that help you figure out who to vote for based on the party programs. We have over 20 parties in parliament, so it's complicated. So I imagine if you have a black box of AI or an LLM somewhere behind that, and you have no idea what it's doing, you could manipulate all these outcomes and push people to vote for something they normally wouldn't vote for, but hey, it's saying they trust it. So I would imagine if it works, that kind of tech works in Holland, it would work in the States. It's easier. It's two parties. Yeah, not that difficult.
Right.
You could manipulate people. I mean, they're stopping it now. You can't do it on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram anymore, or TikTok. So I wouldn't be surprised they would try it through one of these models.
I'm certain it will happen at some point. I mean, we had in the last election Cambridge Analytica and all of the social influencing.
Someone did a test with ChatGPT, asking something about Biden and about Trump. Yeah, I have no political standpoint on the U.S. But it would make a whole nice story on Biden and some horrible story about Trump. And someone said, well, it's biased because we asked the same question and this came out. And it's supposed to give objective information, and it's not. So that was all discussions. Yeah, it's rigged. And,
it's rigged. That's the training data.
Yeah, well, that's another discussion. If you would say that something comes out which is factual and people don't like the outcome because that's not how we want society to be. Right. But that's actually how it is. And I'm not going to say anything because someone will get angry. But if you say, okay, we need to change that, then you're actually inserting a bias into the model. Yeah. Hence, where there's no bias, there's factual information. You're creating a bias by taking that out because you don't like the outcome. But that's not how it should work.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating. That's one of the things I love about the discussion around large language models is exactly this, because the data set being used for large language models almost certainly is biased because people are biased. People are the ones who created the data. And so it's training on data that people created that is inherently biased data.
But that's our society.
It is our society. And so I think, but the question is, because people trust the outcome that the chatbot is giving you, and it's working from biased information that was created by people who were biased, and the model has biased information, et cetera, it raises some really interesting philosophical questions, at least for me. And I think they will become less philosophical and much more practical about, well, so what is our obligation to make sure that we're defeating the bias in the algorithm, defeating the bias in the training set of data by introducing, like you say, more bias of our own. I mean, I think one of the things I read
you're introducing wishful thinking. But let's take an example that doesn't hurt anybody's feelings, because that's not our purpose. Let's say we concluded that all water glasses are a transparent glass, no color. Okay. But we know that's not true because there's also blue glasses and orange glasses and yellow glasses. But generally speaking, most glasses are transparent. Yeah. So if you ask ChatGPT what color is a water glass, it would say it's transparent. But we know that's not true.
Right.
We would like it to say that there's also other glasses, but 99.9% of the people use transparent glasses.
Sure.
So why would that be a problem of ChatGPT or any other model saying it's a transparent glass? Why is it a problem that we acknowledge the fact that it's only 0.01% of colored glasses?
So I think let me give an analogy that may make people upset.
I try to avoid that.
Well, it's something I read about actually about ChatGPT in particular, and I don't know that this is true. I've never actually tried it myself, but someone asked ChatGPT to write a program, a Python program, to predict if a scientist was going to be good or not.
If a scientist was going to be good,
yeah,
interesting.
And the program that I saw it spit out was find out the sex of the scientist. If the scientist is male, they're likely to be good. If the scientist is female, they're likely to be bad. I don't know what was prompted, how that result came out, but if it's based on training data, that the model can't evaluate truth from false, right? It can't evaluate truth from false. It can't evaluate facts. Morals. It's just presenting facts the way it understands them. Which is to say, not at all.
No, it generates text.
Yeah, and so I think it would be very, very helpful to have guide rails to say, maybe your training data needs to be looked at there, or maybe we need to think about how we answer that question, or maybe we should tell them they shouldn't ask the question that way because it's going to prompt an answer that's probably not correct, that you're not equipped to deal with it.
This is interesting because one of the discussions, or one of the points that keeps coming back in every discussion I have about the large language model, is that my conclusion is that you need some sort of curation layer, front or back, I don't know where you put it in the system, but you need to curate, have rules over the model, which are like general rules for every model, the same. I call it a curation layer. Maybe we should call it something else. But and that should be general, because these, how you say, bumper
guide rails. Yeah.
It's like with the bowling for the kids,
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
These guide rails should be general, and I wouldn't be surprised. And actually, it wouldn't be a bad idea for an institution like the EU to fund or subsidize a company, or help a company or university to create that. Because then you get like an objective set of rules which apply for everybody. They're the same, and you get all the discriminatory and I don't know, biased stuff you really don't want in compliance with the rules and regulations. Right. And if you make that available to everybody for free and just maintain it by the EU, you basically created by design.
And that's where I really hope something like this new EU regulatory body that they're creating through this act or through this regulation, I hope that's where they go, is exactly that sort of a thing, because I think that would be immensely valuable. I completely agree.
I have an invitation because in a couple, 2 months ago, I was in Edinburgh for an event, and we recorded podcasts or broadcasters there. And there was someone from the EU, and we talked about it. And I said, well, when you finish the law, we're going to pack all the equipment and come to your office and come and record there and talk about it. And we have an open invitation to go to the EU and to Brussels.
Oh, that'll be a great
Maybe I'll take you with me for the legal discussion. No, but seriously, it's because they mean really well. And they have I think they have the right, although it's difficult and complex, they have the right intention to make it safer some way.
Yeah.
Because it's totally unpredictable.
Yeah.
And if we take that to chatbots, or when you put an LLM behind a chatbot, I think if you use that, my careful conclusion would be that you would be introducing an unknown liability You're the legal person here.
I think it's, generally speaking, liability for whom and on what basis would be the question we would have to think through. Yeah.
Okay, you're let's say you're a consultancy company or you're a conversation designer and you're using the software and the company says, oh, we want to use an LLM. If you use an LLM to create intents and then enter these into the system, that's not an issue. I don't think there's any intellectual property or copyright issue, whatever. It's just creating sentences and words and that's fine. But once you start using it to generate knowledge or answers, and use everything that's in the model, then it becomes, and you put that out there in the chatbot, then it becomes complex because you don't know where it comes from.
Right.
And I could imagine that there could be at some point, like we have with the DALL-E model, some copyright infringement, and you have no clue it's happening.
Right.
So that's what I meant with, okay, you put it in there, it's a black box, the model keeps developing, you're using the model as it develops. Mm-hmm. So the answer of today is not the answer of tomorrow.
Right.
And you have no idea if you're infringing on someone's copyright. Then what happens? Who's responsible? Is that because this is interesting, is then the company that uses the chatbot, let's say it's Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. If they have a chatbot and they're using, is Coca-Cola liable, or is the LLM liable, or is the chatbot platform liable, or the conversation designer liable? There are so many parties involved.
Right.
Who takes ownership?
Right. I think that's going to be a matter of contract in many circumstances, and so risk allocation at these big corporations is handled generally by contracts and allocation. In the U.S.,
they're big.
Yeah, and so you allocate risk based on IP to certain parties, and so. There would be, obviously, you'd sue the one with the biggest pockets, but then they may bring in and plead or otherwise bring in the person they think should be actually liable based on what's going on there. I think what you're saying there, though, also makes me wonder, if we put in place these guardrails, the model continues to evolve, more data gets added, it continues to generate, the guardrails are going to have to move too, right?
I know. That's why I said it should be on a government level.
Well, but I think even the guardrails are going to have to move as the model evolves, because certain things, if you put guardrails in and the model evolves past a certain place, maybe the guardrails are not working as they were intended. Yeah, we saw that
with Dan. Do anything now, right?
Yeah.
And you figure out something to break the bot.
Right.
And then they figured a countermeasure, and then smart people found something else. That's the game. I understand that, I like the game, but in the current state, that's not a problem if you're playing around with it in ChatGPT itself. Right. But it becomes a problem if you integrate it behind something.
For sure,
with the API.
Yeah.
And you have no clue what it does.
Yeah.
And that no clue what it does. Makes me wonder who's responsible. Forget about contracts. If you look at it from a logical standpoint, because I have no idea what the contracts of ChatGPT look like, what liability they exclude.
Right.
And I imagine if you take the API of ChatGPT and you integrate it in your software, there is somewhere a clause that they're not liable. I would imagine that would be actually interesting to look at.
It would be. I actually don't know the answer myself. Generally speaking, if I would say, something corporations are going to have to think about. Let me put it that way, because I think
they have to ask the question.
They have to ask the question, and they can't just kind of do this sort of contracting on autopilot, because I think that it does definitely raise issues like
nobody has experience in this field.
Yeah,
there is none.
Yeah.
But let's forget about contracts. If you look at it logically, who would be responsible, or not responsible, liable?
I think it depends on what. So it's hard to answer that in the abstract. So you're saying a copyright violation?
For instance, let's say in an LLM, forget who it is, doesn't matter, and they haven't had a contract. Because what will happen? We know. If an LLM knows it might have a risk of copyright, they'll exclude it in their liability, in their contracts.
Okay.
So then who's next?
The company who's using it. Yeah.
So then Coca-Cola, if Coca-Cola has a chatbot, would be liable for the copyright infringement?
I think it would be an interesting question that a court would have to think hard about. I'm not going to take a position on that just because. Let me give a specific example. It's very complex. Yeah. So Coca-Cola puts up a chat bot that someone has to interact with.
For the listeners, we have nothing with Coca-Cola. It's just a random example.
Yeah. Coca-Cola puts up a chat bot. Someone interacts with it, and for whatever reason, it starts spitting out Prince lyrics in its answers. So the estate of Prince sues Coca-Cola for copyright infringement because its chatbot started giving copyrighted answers.
Okay.
I think Coca-Cola would have a reasonable argument to make that it did not intend that to happen. Its chatbot was malfunctioning, shouldn't have given those copyrighted things, and it shouldn't be liable. I don't know what a court would say about that. It's a really interesting question. I certainly Coke would do its best to say, hey, go after the LLM. But,
which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but no, I don't know how that would play out.
If we take that to a higher level, that if you're your legal counsel, but if you're in a company that is implementing a chatbot or a consultant who helps implementing a chatbot or a conversational designer designing a chatbot with an LLM, what would you advise them to do or not do, or which countermeasure to take at this moment with the knowledge we have now, because the law is not in place yet?
Yeah.
What should they do in order to make sure they mitigate the risks as much as possible?
So I think it's really hard, first of all.
I didn't say it was easy. You're not here because it's easy.
It's really hard, and I think it would really depend very much. Legal advice is very much situation dependent, of course. And so it would depend on what the context of the chatbot is, how it's going to be used, who it's going to be interacting with.
Okay.
Generally speaking, of course, you're going to be wanting to give a lot of disclaimers. You're going to want to have good terms and conditions, and we'll look at some of those maybe with the chat PDF that we're going to look at later.
Yeah.
That try your level best to kind of exclude liability where you can.
This is interesting because if most chatbots, if you go in them, and we test a lot, most of them will very decently say, okay, don't enter any privacy sensible information. Perfect. Some of them say, okay, I'm still learning because I might make mistakes.
Right.
Very good. I've not seen one chatbot saying, oh, by the way, here are my terms and conditions. Please comply with them. Say, yes, I agree. And then continue. None of them do that.
Yeah.
Because no one would enter the chatbot if they had to do that, right?
Generally speaking, though, they are available on the websites. You have to look for them, but they're there.
Yeah, but they're not mentioned in the chatbot. They're
that's
not
right.
referenced.
That's right.
So one of the things, I'm learning here, right? So one of the things, and we're about sharing knowledge. One of the things we should do as a community, think about if we're using AI or an LLM in your model, make sure, first of all, check your terms and conditions on for the company you're doing it.
Yeah.
Is it actually in there?
Yeah.
If it's not, you need to change them, right?
Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah.
The second one is point out that they're there and there's a reference to using AI and LLMs, and put it in the start of your chatbot, make it friendly. I mean, that's our trade. Yeah. But saying where it is, you want to read it, click here, you go to the webpage where you can read it.
Yeah.
But you should also say, we do not ask you to comply with our terms, but if you enter, you have complied. That's basically what you do, right?
And the question is whether that's entirely enforceable or whether it even mitigates your risk from a situation we're talking about from a copyright perspective. It may not. But
the copyright risk, no, but the maybe the making the mistakes and the awareness
bias,
of that you're using an AI and an LLM.
Yes.
That one is already there.
Yeah.
We can't solve everything, and I think the law is going to help.
Yeah.
But it's going to be so general that you still have to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. No, but I think really it's legal advice in this area is going to be changing a lot. But I think lawyers need to educate themselves about how their companies are using these tools. They need to be up on the regulations as they evolve, because I think what was true a month ago is no longer true today in terms of how regulations in the regulatory space, it's rapidly changing.
And the models are changing.
And the models change too. Yeah. And so I think also educating, having a good conversation with developers to make sure that they're thinking about things like bias, that they're thinking about things like making sure that the trading data can be scrubbed, that we're looking at guardrails to address these sorts of issues, and then being able to articulate that as part of terms and conditions about an approach is probably a good way to, at least for now, that's probably the best you're going to be able to do. Once regulations come into force, I think then you're going to be doing more, making sure you're complying, making sure you're registering if you need to. If your particular chat bot falls within one of these high risk criteria, for example, making sure you're complying, you're registering, you're filling all that information in. That's where the lawyers are really going to be able to help. But I think now the best advice that you can give a client is be transparent.
And there's one more layer that maybe is advisable to introduce, and I'm not sure how to do that, but I think a lot of the chatbots are not tested properly.
Yeah.
Because if I see what we find in our tests, in some of the situations, you'd say, okay, if you would have tested properly or continued developing, maybe you stopped, this wouldn't be in there. Like missing links or broken links, right, or stuff like that, or typos, and these sound like minor things, but they're actually big things because the customer sees those things. These people are not paying attention to this. Should I take this seriously?
Right.
Tone of voice, the branding, the sound of the brand. Usually, it's not in there, and I think this is another one. If you include that in your testing policy. If you think about, okay, I need to figure out if there is a bias in my usage of AI and LLMs.
Right.
So I think there is space here for scientific research because we don't have the answer yet. How to test your chatbot for, well, basically whatever's in the law, but also for morally what you don't want as a company.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I do think that's more than what's in the law.
No, agreed. And I think the other thing I would say is that kind of there's a new field that I'm sure you may have talked about it already, but algorithmic audits, I think are things.
We haven't talked about it yet.
So I think it's really an important thing that it's a newer field, but I think the EU said some stuff on it. They're certainly becoming much more popular among big companies, but I think in general, that should be something that companies are looking at about how to audit their algorithms, how to get third-party audits of their algorithms to make sure that they're looking at things.
It's a new business model for KPMG, and they lobbied well.
Yes,
because exactly. I think that's going to be an expensive business.
I think it will. I think very necessary, and I think to give some, maybe that will be an avenue to giving people some confidence that the algorithms they're working with are certified or complying with some best practices, et cetera.
But then I would assume that that software becomes available to do that, because you could use AI to do that.
Sure. Yeah.
So why would I use KPMG? No, well, why not?
Yeah.
Because you can tell it what to do iteratively. Okay, if this happens, then do that, and it will do it.
Yeah. One of the things I find fascinating about generative AI in particular is this idea that it will actually democratize code. Developers are,
and not only code.
Yeah, but people who wouldn't otherwise know how to build an application.
I know one of my kids used ChatGPT to build a trading bot for crypto.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And he's now doing simulations. But he says, "Yeah, I asked Jeff. He can actually code, but he said, I tried to make my life easy, and I asked it to make it for me. So I gave him a basic code. He expanded on it, and he built it in a few hours. And I'm like, okay."
I asked ChatGPT early on to give me a business process management 2.0 or business process management notation 2.0 map of hopscotch. And it like that, the game hopscotch. And so basically it's kids jump and then they jump twice and skip jump, that sort of thing.
That's hopscotch.
Yeah.
Okay, it's on the tiles.
Exactly.
Okay, I understand.
And so it gave me a BPMN 2.0 model for how the game is played, just like that.
Seconds.
Yeah.
That is scary.
Yeah.
But it's also good news because it will disrupt a lot of businesses with black boxes.
Yes.
And I'm not sure everybody is going to like that, but it's democratizing code. You're correct, but it's also democratizing knowledge, and it's reducing. That's what I said earlier. It's reducing our stress of choice if it's done in a good way. And let me explain. If I Google now and ask for, I don't know, something, it gives me 113,000 pages. How do I know which one is the right one?
Right.
If I have trustworthy AI or an LLM that helps me do this and just gives me, if I ask for 5 results, just give me 5 results.
Yeah.
It's the same annoying thing if I go to booking.com. Sorry for booking.com. I go there and they give me endless lists of results. I don't care. Just give me the ones I want. And you know my preferences. They're not giving it to me because I need to go through. I understand they have contracts, but so I think ChatGPT or models alike, they can help us reduce the amount of time we spend on searching for stuff.
I think that's right. I think the biggest barrier that I see to that is the hallucination problem. Because I think right now, I at least don't always trust that what I'm getting is actually real. And I think if they can't solve that, then people will start to wonder whether they can trust the results they're getting. If they can, I completely agree with you. I think that is potentially a huge time saver for people.
But that's also where the SEO and the online advertising dies.
I know. Yeah.
And I find that really exciting if that happens, because it would declutter our internet.
Well, and the funny thing is again, coming back to the black box issue, SEO makes it messy too. I mean, you don't know, you shouldn't trust the results necessarily you're getting because SEO is gaming the system just like everything else is.
I know.
And so why would we trust SEO results when we, that's the interesting thing to me is the psychology of how humans are going to, whether they will accept this or not is going to be a fascinating question. I think that we'll have to see.
If there's a few big fuck ups, instantly it's dead. That's what's going to happen. If we see, and I think we're seeing amazing results, and I think the regulations are going to help with this.
I agree,
because I think I talked to the lady of the EU at the time. I think they see this. They don't have all the technical knowledge. I have to say that they don't. They do understand, but they don't know what's really underneath and how complex it is. And I think that's partly why they made these regulations. Because they need to get an understanding. It needs to open up. Also in order to be able to innovate and apply it in a properly socially correct fashion, we need to know more, and indeed algorithms need to be understandable and auditable. Having said that, I'm afraid that it's going to be unattainable and unreachable for the small companies.
No, I think that's the risk. That's the trade-off, I think, because to me,
that worries me.
I agree. I think you can't kill the innovation at the small level. That's really, really critical in kind of new areas and in evolving areas like this. But at the same time, I think this will have an adoption problem if they can't solve the trust issues that people may already have, or maybe I'm kind of in the minority there.
No, you're not in the minority there. It is a fundamental problem.
But I agree with you, and the regulations are a path to do that. I completely agree with the point that you're making there. So,
and having said that, because also in healthcare, I see that AI. My vision is that AI and LLMs can make doctors better doctors.
Yeah.
And I fear that doctors and universities that do not adopt it in a proper way, with curation, by the way, they're going to fall behind.
I agree.
Their mind cannot process the amount of data that these models can process.
I think the same thing's true in the legal field. I think it's true in a lot of fields. I think there's a lot of debate now in kind of, if you look at legal education classes and things like that, there are people who are huge proponents and they say this will displace 30% of the work that lawyers do or more, 70%, some people say.
You have more time available for the really complex cases.
Right.
It's not gonna kill your job. I don't believe that.
No, I agree too. I agree with that completely. But I think the difference is that people who aren't looking at this stuff are going to fall behind.
They're going to lose their jobs.
And the people who are looking at this stuff and are going to be able to be the quote unquote AI whisperers or the chatbot whisperers, they're creating kind of, I think, more, maybe I'm being self-serving when I'm saying this, but they're creating the ability to basically make themselves better as lawyers, as doctors, as financial professionals.
As any professional.
Yeah, exactly.
There's one concern though I have, and that's not for the self-employed, but that's for the people who are employed. If you think about this, let's say you're in a marketing department and you write copy.
Yeah.
If you use AI or an LLM, you can have the copy written for you.
Right.
So, of course, you do the complex stuff, you do the editing. But if you're a boss, you say, okay, but now you have this AI and these LLMs to help you. I expect your output to go up.
Right.
So you should do more work in the same amount of time.
Right.
And that's kind of worrying because I don't think that is realistic.
I agree.
And
Yeah.
we've seen already so many people, so many young people having burnouts. I'm really worried that AI is going to help create more burnouts because the pressure is going to go up. Also because we're asking people, we're going to ask people to be more innovative.
Right.
Because the AI and LLMs are helping us brainstorming, giving interesting inputs, a lot of inputs, more data to process by your brain. And I don't think everybody can handle that. To be honest,
I agree with that, and I think the other thing here is that technology, AI is a technology, and technology is a tool.
Yeah,
and tools make us better at what we do. At least that's what they should do. But when people convert making me better and more efficient to just turn your crank faster, it's a huge problem, and I think too many companies think that way rather than basically saying, we're going to be better at what we do. Maybe we won't produce more. We're just going to do it better. Many companies say, okay, let's just do more.
I think you're able, with the same team, you can create more value, but try to figure out how you make life easier for your staff, and then they become more committed and they have more time available to think creatively and create.
Right.
Well, that's my thought. That was a worry of mine.
I think it's a valid concern. Yeah.
And I looked at this and I also asked the lady about it, but it's not addressed in any law.
No, not that I'm aware of. Yeah.
But that's interesting because that's one of the huge risks. Everybody's talking about jobs that are going to be lost.
Yep.
I think if you don't adopt, at least don't understand what's happening, then you might have the risk of losing your job or becoming obsolete or whatever, or having to retrain. But it cannot be used to make the stress and the workload bigger.
Right.
And I think there should be something or someone, or from a legal perspective or HR perspective, should pay attention to this, and it's not out there.
Well, you could make the same argument for robotics in manufacturing. That was designed as an efficiency.
Yeah.
And it cost a lot of people a lot of jobs. There's arguments that maybe it actually just changed what they did and made different work. But I think what I hear you saying at the very least is really a values issue as a society about what we value.
Yeah.
And that's hard to address legally.
It's a soft thing.
Yeah, it's a soft thing. And so it's definitely a conversation we should be having. It's a conversation that we should have been having since the 80s, in my view.
True.
But it's maybe not coming quickly enough. So.
No, but I think HR professional. I'm not an HR professional, but I think HR professionals should sort of think about this and have internal policies about, okay, we're using this. What does it mean for our employees, and how do we leverage the technology, but not at the expense of our employees,
of our people, right,
or clients even. Mm-hmm. Let's go to
sure. Yeah.
You have a selected chat PDF. and you asked me to upload a document.
Yeah, so Chat PDF it's built on ChatGPT. It uses the AI, and where ChatGPT cannot look at files unless you actually manually put them in to the chat window.
You mean the text?
The text. You can't look at text. You can't
not
basically
too much, even.
Yeah, you can't. Not too much. You can't give it a link and say, "Hey, can you summarize this document for me?"
I actually tried something with the link, and it did summarize the text on the webpage for me.
Do you know what it's doing there?
No.
I've actually experienced this. It is hallucinating the answer. Seriously, based on the URL description.
Oh, damn. Because I checked it and it was actually really good.
It's really good. Yeah, it's really convincing. But no, it's a complete hallucination.
Oh,
they can't refer to outside documents. So that's what this is designed to do, is to allow you to basically put in a document, and then it ingests it, and you can converse with the document like you are with a chatbot.
So you can ask a question
about what the document contains. Give me a summary of the document. Yeah.
So we uploaded a document. What was the document about?
So it's because it's experimental. It's limited to 100 pages,
which I find already quite big.
Yeah, it is quite big. Yeah, it is quite big compared to ChatGPT. I
didn't have to make an account. I just went on it.
Correct. Yeah. So I created I took a document that was in the public domain, the first 100 pages of Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment.
Okay.
And we put it in to the PDF. Before we go there, though, can we look at their terms and conditions real quick?
Okay. Where are they?
If you go to Home and go to the bottom of the website, there will be a link.
Pricing, Twitter contact terms. Here we go.
So I'm going to be a little critical here.
No, don't be a little critical. Just be critical, and because the amount of AI or ChatGPT based applications coming out every day. I'm subscribed to a couple of newsletters. It's like a tsunami of applications. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. It's just mind-boggling, and we never look at our terms, and I think we should after we're done.
So I'm very sympathetic to the person who built this. It's one person. I don't know where they are located. They are in Europe somewhere, but it's one person who built this. Good. It's a great idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. But if you look down at what the intellectual property rights section, section 2.
Okay, let's go there.
Essentially, what you need to do, your submissions and contributions, what this effectively says is that you're giving them a right to reuse anything you submit in any way they want. You're giving them a license to be able to say, I can use any portion of this. It becomes a license for me to do anything with it from here on in.
Well, we don't own that. So we enter something that we don't own, and they take ownership of it.
They get a license from it. We
can't give a license.
Well, that's why we chose this, because it's in the public domain. But if you didn't read the terms and conditions and you submitted something that actually had a copyright, you've given them a license to it. Whether or not that's actually enforceable is another question. But according to the use of the website, their terms and conditions say they now have a license to do whatever they want with what you've submitted.
And I don't know what's under the hood. So basically, we're training ChatGPT because that's what's happening. Yeah, they're using Chat. So where you think I can enter something safely, you can't, because you're giving them a license, and ChatGPT is training their model on it. Oh my God!
And not only that, if you go down one of the warranties in this that you're giving them, and I think the reason they I don't know, but I'm thinking the reason they did this is to comply in part with GDPR. If any real person is mentioned, you're warranting that you have permission from that individual to give their name and likeness for use by this company. Basically what it limits it me to in terms of if I truly want to strictly comply with this, I have to give this fiction in the public domain. I can't give it anything else because I don't have the right to give your name. I don't have a written guarantee that you've given me permission to use your name and likeness. So I couldn't submit anything from...
No, but nobody looks at this.
No one looks at this.
And you don't have to comply to it. It didn't ask me anything.
Oh, you do. You would. What the question, you're getting to the point of what their remedy is. So they're going to claim Well, the person submitting it was supposed to comply with these terms and conditions. They accepted it by using my website. And so I'm using it. Yes, I didn't have permission, but I thought I did because I assumed that the people who are using my website are complying with terms and conditions.
But we know assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups, right?
But I think they probably had someone write them their terms and conditions very broadly so that they could
do whatever they want.
Well, not just do whatever they want, but also so they could comply with things like GDPR.
But they think they're complying.
They're hoping to comply. They know they can't, but this gives them at least the appearance of protection, right? And so this is the wrong way, in my view, to do something like this.
Right.
I think you should just be transparent and say, look, if you don't have the right to submit this stuff, don't.
So, but this could easily be solved, because if you go to, did I already put it in? Yeah, here.
Yeah.
If I go here, it says here, welcome to the Project Gutenberg ebook of Crime and Punishment. This is already about the book.
Yep.
There should be something before here. Okay, you just uploaded this document. Please confirm that you did or did not, whatever, input any names or information about a person you do not have permission for.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And then...
If no, then you delete the document and we'll go on.
Then you don't even have to delete. Then they delete.
Right.
Then sorry, your document is deleted and removed from our server.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That would be a better way to handle what the problem they're trying to solve. Yeah.
And if you say yes, well, then you're liable.
Right.
Because then you took a conscious
yeah.
decision to go ahead.
Yeah.
And the other question was the right to use it. Well, if it's in the public domain, fine. You say it's public domain,
right.
So it's not an issue. But if it's a company document,
right?
I think they had a problem with the Samsung code, right, in ChatGPT, where they asked it to correct I think it was Samsung, some secret project or some secret code.
Oh dear!
And they put it in to see if it could correct the code, and then the code went into the system.
Oh no!
Yeah, there was out there.
Oh, that's terrible.
So basically, their IP was like into the public domain. Bye bye.
Wow, that's an oopsie.
And interesting. One of my kids works for. He's a software developer. Works for a company. I'm not going to say any names,
yeah.
but they had to sign a document, and it was formalized within the company. It's originally a US-based company. It works for a daughter of the company. But they had to sign a document saying we're not entering any information in LLMs. I thought it was very good.
That's smart.
The signing doesn't mean anything, but the fact that they're making their employees aware
of what they can and can't do,
and the inherent risks, especially based on the Samsung disaster.
Yeah.
Because that's the value of your company.
Right. No, absolutely.
So I thought it was like, this is amazing. They're doing this. This is good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, companies. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
And not from a legal standpoint, but from
a people standpoint.
Yeah, they have no idea.
Right. So it's an easy mistake to make if you're not thinking about it, for sure. Yeah.
So let's ask it a question. We put the document in. Oh, you want to go more on the terms?
No, that was what I wanted to cover.
So basically the advice there's so many of them coming out, but if we do it smartly, why don't we download then the terms and conditions of other companies, upload it here, and then ask it. We have a few questions to ask. You can just ask it the question. Saves the time reading,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
That actually would be a smart thing to do. So what are we going to ask?
All right, so...
I didn't read the book, by the way.
So I've actually done this before. I'm interested to see if I get a different result this time.
Cool.
And what I'd like to ask the bot is, can you tell me what happens in the story with the horse?
What happened with the horse?
Yeah.
Is there a horse in the story?
Yes, but not in those words.
This intrigues me, but can you tell me what happens with the horse in the story? So we're asking Chat PDF to answer this question about the book. Here we go. And Okay, now it's typing. Yes, on page 42 of Crime and Punishment, which is, it's good that it's actually mentioning the page. A poor boy becomes upset when he witnesses a group of men brutally killing a horse. The boy kisses the horse's dead head and tries to attack one of the men responsible for the killing. His father eventually takes him away from the scene.
This is interesting. This is not the result I got last time.
And you asked the same question.
I did. Who is the boy? And I'm curious who the boy is.
You want the name of the boy?
Yeah, I'd love the name of the boy.
You don't remember this boy?
I'm curious if it's the same boy I'm thinking it is. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, does it remember the previous question? Oh. So it's thinking the name of the boy is not mentioned in the given pages of the ebook. Okay.
Okay. Are there any other horses mentioned in the story?
Okay. Horses mentioned in the story. Are there any other horses mentioned in the story? Here we go. The given pages of the ebook only mention on one horse, the sorrel nag. What the hell is that? The sorrel nag that is killed in the scene described on page 42. Is sorrel nag a reference to a horse?
Yes. And so this is what it missed the first time I did this. I asked it about a horse. He describes, at least in this English translation of the Russian novel, he describes it variously as a mare and a nag. A nag is basically just a beaten down old horse.
Yeah.
And the first time I had to actually prompt it with the word nag or with the word mare to actually get this answer.
Okay.
So it's doing better this time. It's learned, which is very cool. But I thought it was really interesting. So if you prompt it with nag, I wonder if it gives you more, because there are actually many more mentions of nag in that section of the book.
Does the book talk about nags?
Or a nag.
A nag.
Or a mare.
A nag. Oh, that's two questions.
Okay.
Well, let's see if it does two questions. Or a mare, like this?
M-A-R-E.
M-A, like that?
Yep.
Okay. The given page of the ebook mention both a thin little sorrel beast and a wretched nag in the scene where the horse is killed. Later in the same scene, the horse is referred to as a mare.
So it's getting it right. This is excellent. That's really cool. So you can actually to give a summary of the story, and it actually does a fairly good job, at least of the first 100 pages.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Please. Oh, am I doing that? Thanks. Please give a summary of the book. So it's typing Crime and Punishment is a novel by Fyodor Dostoevsky. First published in 1866. The story follows Rodion Raskolnikov, a poor former student in St. Petersburg who plans to kill an old pawnbroker for her money. After committing the murder, Raskolnikov is consumed by guilt and paranoia, and he struggles to reconcile his actions with his own moral code. Meanwhile, he becomes involved with several other characters, including a prostitute named Sonia and a police detective named Porfiry Petrovich. As the story unfolds, the novel explores themes of morality, redemption, and the nature of human suffering in a complex and psychologically nuanced way.
It's a pretty good summary, actually.
I haven't read the book, but especially the last part intrigues me.
Yeah.
Because the novel explores themes of morality, redemption, and the nature of human suffering in a complex and psychologically nuanced way. This is a level of explaining that is above the book.
Yeah.
And I find, if you confirm that this is correct.
Yeah, it is.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I do wonder where it's drawing it from, but it is fantastic. It really is.
I wouldn't be drawing it from some. Let's ask it. Say, where did you get this? Because this is they can't have derived it from the book itself.
No, definitely not. Especially since we'd only have the first 100 pages.
So, interestingly enough, you upload the book, the PDF, but it gets information somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's not supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did you get this info? And I'll put it between these. So we ask it to tell us where it got this last sentence from. Here we go. See, it didn't make it up in itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It says here the information that the novel explores themes of morality, redemption, and the nature of human suffering in a complex and psychologically nuanced way is a common interpretation of Crime and Punishment by literary critics and scholars. It's based on analysis of the novel's plot, characters, and themes. This interpretation can be found in many literary analysis of the book, as well in reviews and critiques by various authors.
So clearly it's drawing from other sources than the PDF you've given it. Yeah.
This is interesting. So how can you trust this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. How do you know it's not going to hallucinate it? Yeah.
So again, we're back where we started.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah.
We just broke the pot. It wasn't the intention, but this is actually worrying because you cannot trust the outcome.
Yeah.
And I would assume just tell me what's in the PDF, but it's not.
Yeah. Let's ask it how the novel concludes.
Well, you mean the end of the book?
Yeah. What's the end of the book?
Okay. And what is the end of the book? Okay. But the end of the book is not in the PDF.
No, it's not. That's hilarious. So
Okay.
it's getting it. It's definitely drawing from other sources.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, it says the end of the book. It's actually giving us the
Actual
real end of the book.
Yeah.
Because the way it reads, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But you can confirm it. But the end of the book is not in the PDF, so it's not drawing from the PDF.
No. No, it's not.
You're not going to use this again, right?
No, I'm not.
Oh man, this is. But this is the thing. There's so many of these applications coming out, and we can't test them all. And I'm glad you brought this one because I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
But somehow, maybe we can ask it something else that is not in the book.
Well, I'm curious what it would say. Well, tell us about Crime and Punishment 2, the second book of Crime and Punishment, which of course doesn't exist.
Tell us about. Okay, good one. They're gonna hate us. Punishment 2.
Yeah.
The sequel.
The sequel.
Right?
Yeah.
The sequel.
Oh, it caught us. Okay.
It says there's no sequel. But we can ask it. Tell us about Dostoevsky.
Yeah. Fyodor Dostoevsky.
So we're gonna ask it. Tell us about Fyodor Dostoevsky. And that's not going to be in the book. So it's telling us a whole story. I'm not going to read it all; it's too much. But it tells us a lot of information, and
Yeah.
it's definitely not in the book.
Yeah, for sure.
It's writing a book about
Fyodor Dostoevsky.
Dostoevsky. So, yeah, I'm a bit blown away. I didn't expect this to happen.
I didn't either.
To be honest.
No, I didn't either. The last time I tried this, it was definitely sticking to the four corners of the text I gave it. So,
And we should ask it something about the book that has that is from the here and now. Which computer did used to write the book?
I love that.
And it should say, well, there were no computers in that time
Right.
and age. Oh, brilliant. It says Fyodor Dostoevsky lived in the 19th century, long before the invention of computers. Therefore, he did not use a computer to write Crime and Punishment or any other works. Instead, he wrote his novels and stories by hand or with the help of a typewriter. Brilliant.
So which typewriter did he use?
Good, but it's good one. IBM, I presume. No, just kidding. Right? Which IBM International Business Machines. They started with typewriters, right? That was the whole thing.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Which typewriter did he use? It's definitely drawing from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So we can go on and make it hallucinate.
Yeah.
Do whatever
Right. Yeah.
we want. That sort of this wasn't the intention, but this is how bullshit comes to reports and stuff. I find this worrying, to be honest.
Oh, I completely agree. One of my favorite things is to look at if you do searches on skeptics. Well, a lot of them basically call it ChatGPT the consummate bullshit artist. And it's not wrong to say that, because I remember reading one thing by a professor who fed it its information security exam.
Okay.
And the results it got were so convincing that it took the professor a long time to figure out that what ChatGPT was saying was nonsense, but it was very convincing nonsense. So,
but does it say in the terms and conditions? Let's look again. That it's only using, you're the expert here, that it's only using the PDF to answer the question, or it's
so I don't remember that
sources.
specifically. It advertises itself as basically looking in the document and allowing you to interrogate the document. So it is clearly doing more than that. Since last I looked at it, I don't know what it says specifically in the terms and conditions. I'd have to do some reading and searching.
Well, we can also do that later, but
yeah.
It's a German company.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll send them an email that we broke their bot. If they want to comment on it. No, because I think it's a good concept, to be honest.
I agree. No, I think it's really cool.
I love the concept, but this is, they should warn you for that, because basically they have no control over ChatGPT. They use the API.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And they have no control of it. It does what it does.
Yeah.
So let's try one more question to see if we can get it completely off the track. Something completely wrong. Something like a rumor has it that Fyodor Dostoevsky had an affair with, I don't know, the Tsarina.
Yeah. Yeah, let's try that. I like that one.
Okay. Is it true that, what's his name? I got it here. He had an affair with the wife of the Tsar. We might get Putin on our ass. This is amazing. Okay, this is so funny. It says there's no evidence to suggest that Fyodor Dostoevsky had an affair with the wife of the Tsar. In fact, there's no record of Dostoevsky ever meeting or interacting with the Tsar's wife, Alexandra Feodorovna. While Dostoevsky did have a relationship with several women throughout his life, I didn't ask that, including his 2 wives, there's no evidence to support the claim that he had an affair with Alexandra Feodorovna.
Who
it's
makes the
possible
claim?
that this rumor was started as a result of confusion with another writer or historical figure.
So who made the claim? Let's ask it who.
We're going in deep now.
But the source does not contain information. Oh, that's fascinating. So now it's going back to the idea that it's only looking at the document.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'll send them an email that we tested their
This is very cool. Like you say, I love the concept. I think it's a needed thing. So I hope they can make it work.
And in all fairness, for the guy who made it, amazing concept.
Yeah.
Please continue with it.
Please.
But terms and conditions need some work. If I'm
I think that's right, and I think
well, actually, not the terms and conditions. Make me aware that they are there.
I think it would be better for them to take a different tack on the terms and conditions. I'm not giving them advice, but if I were to, I think saying I'm asking for a license to do whatever I want with this, and you've given me permission to use anyone's likeness, that goes too far to me.
That goes too far, and I think they should start with you've uploaded this document.
Yep.
Please confirm that or deny that, whatever, and then the liability is on your side and on their side. Because it would be stupid or not fair that they'd be sued for it, and because it's such a simple site.
Yeah, agreed. And this is the kind of thing you want to see innovation.
Yeah,
you want to see this innovation on. Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else we want to ask the bot?
I think I'm good. I'm also really impressed that in such a short time, since I tried this only a couple of weeks ago, that it got the NAG question right this time. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
so
it's not the easiest kind of literature, right?
No, that's right. Yeah.
David, if you so we'll finish the testing. If you could give chatbot developers and people who are busy with LLMs and AI, including that in their applications, not a bit like this, but also in big corporations, small corporations, which steps could they take, or and I'm not asking for legal advice, but just smart advice in order to prepare for the legislation that is coming. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but eventually you have to do something, and whatever you do shouldn't, be contradictory to the law.
Yeah.
And I know that the EU has this checklist, so that's one thing they could use. I already included that in the podcast I had with the EU lady.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, your legal counsel, what would you say they should do in order to prepare? And if they take decisions on technology or implementing AI or LLMs, what should they be aware of?
Yeah, I think the things that I would point to are, one, know that regulation's coming. So this is the Wild West now. It's not going to be for the long haul. And so think very hard about your use cases, how you're going to be using this bot, how you expect to be using it. Make sure that you're kind of looking to make sure that your final use case of your technology is not going to fall into some of the high-risk areas if you can avoid it. If you can't, make sure you're going to be developing it intentionally to comply with the laws as they currently exist.
So by design, as what you have now, what's already out there.
Yeah, exactly. I think also as you are training models, making sure that you're paying a lot of care to the training data, that you're thinking through how you're going to respond inevitably when algorithmic audits become kind of something that everyone does. And that
it's inevitable, right?
I think it is. And so I think preparing yourself to make sure that your algorithm is auditable, but also that you're looking at your training data with an eye to how can I make sure that I'm not feeding it garbage or things that are going to be so biased or so skewed as to make my model worth less. And then I think also giving some real intentional thought to the guardrails we talked about earlier. How am I going to put guardrails in where I need to, where I can't avoid bias in my training data? What am I going to do to counteract that?
So the curation layer.
The curation layer, exactly right.
And are you also saying by what you just said that at least the big corporations should have or should think about having their own models with their own data in it and run on their own servers? Not having a risk to disclosing any information going anywhere?
I think that especially if you're going to be a big corporation where looking at your IP is particularly important, you have to think about can I even use some of these large language models that raise these questions, particularly ones where they're cloud-based, where I don't really have any control where the data goes? You really have to think through that very carefully.
Yeah, so the Wild West is still Wild West.
Very much so right now.
That's the conclusion.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Davis. I really enjoyed this.
Me too. Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
And for people who are listening and viewing, we did this late at night. And it's actually I found this very inspirational. Although the subject itself is actually a bit, you could consider it dry.
Sure. Yeah.
That people think, but I think it's an innovation challenge, and it's just like we're pushing through, and we're pushing hard, but we know there are some hurdles to be taken in order to really use it and have the explosion of usage, because now it's an explosion of applications and people hyping it. I mean, you can't open LinkedIn without being have diarrhea.
Inundated, with these links.
Unbelievable.
It really is, yeah.
There's nobody not talking about it, and us included. Having said that, I hope that sort of settles down a bit, and we calm down, and we get to see the real value, but also the real risks. And I hope the legislation on both ends, so in the UK, US, and in Europe, will help. And I kindly invite you that if we go to Brussels, think about maybe come with us.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I'd love that.
Because I'm a practical person, and the legal standpoint here is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it will have an impact. The EU law will have an impact on the whole world.
I agree.
Like the GDPR. Okay.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for being here at night. And we'll be in touch about this.
Sounds great.